be offered anymore. And after 6-7 minutes, you're going to hear a double bang like this, which means that you should conclude within 15 seconds. And after 15 seconds, I'm going to stop listening, maybe throw things at you, but I don't really have anything to throw, so just please stop speaking. There was supposed to be someone judging with me, but they're not. So I'll just do the timing for myself. Okay, the motion before the House is this House believes that states should no longer fund or own public broadcasters such as the BBC, NERIT, or PBS. And have we filled in the sort of ballot? Do we have? Okay. So just like it's literally just write who's speaking first. You can just write the name of the person who's speaking first, so that I have it later to put it on the ballot. And I'll close the door as well. Do you feel that just 1 minute, thank you very much. So without any further ado, I'd like to invite the Prime Minister to open the case for side proposition. Here.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. What we are talking about today, we are talking about states in which there is at least one media that is funded by the state. And let's first of all see what is in fact this state. This state is usually represented by a party or a political regime that has currently the majority in the parliament, that has the main power at that point, and so on and so forth. So we believe that this state is, at least politically speaking, we believe that this state has like some views, wants to impose some measures, and has some political perspectives that are not necessarily covered by the whole population. And we see the problem here that these states are using the state media to promote this idea, to share this idea in their own perspective, while the media is like in a conflict of interest, because it should check the state's point of view. It should always make sure that the state does the best things whenever in its actions, and should show the harmful actions, the harmful effects of the state's action. So at the end of the day, we see that the state is self-controlling, self-checking, and we believe this is a wrong thing. Moreover, we see that after elections in many countries, the state either names the chief of that public-owned broadcaster, or at least puts pressure for one specific person that is once again biased towards that political party to be put in that position. So we see that the state has a lot of influence over what's being broadcasted at those broadcasts. And moreover, we see that the state. We see that it's wrong that the state decides who gets promoted throughout in that broadcaster service, and we see that in the media, for example, in Italy, where Berlusconi owns 80% of owns 80% of the media. No, thank you. We see that the state checks who gets to speak at those televisions, and we see that politicians are interested in putting people there. So we see that these things actually happen. Okay, so now, no, thank you. So now moving on. What are the main objective those broadcasters. They are usually news channels. They are usually channels that have the main goal to inform in an objective, neutral, and equal way their citizens. But we see that politicians tend to make it biased and make it present it in from their own perspective, and to make their own policies and their own actions have a good shape and a good perspective, and we are basically freely giving them this tool to manipulate. And this being our first argument, manipulation. And first of all, let's see what's the main characteristic of those channels. They are accessible for a lot of people, where other media tools are not accessible. They are accessible in villages. They are accessible like in a broad manner. 99% of the population of a country usually has access to this information, which is, as I proved before, biased. So therefore, this system, this system that should inform the citizen and make it take a coherent and objective decision when it comes to election, when it comes to checking whether or if the certain policy is beneficial for him, we see that he cannot take this decision objectively. And we see that, one second, sir, we see that this thing that should assure the checks and balances of the state and should control whether its policies are good or bad, and if they are bad, it should inform the others, is not working. Yes, sir.
We talk about bias and checks and balances. Where are the checks and balances when you only have broadcasters owned by just some very rich guy?
Yeah, we believe that those various guys are from both parts of the parties. We see that in every country, first of all, there's a free media looking to show, to be unbiased and to make it, to glorify itself when it's unbiased. And we see now that the Economist, for example, it's seen and it glorifies itself by being the most unparty addicted media tool, and they glorify themselves, and they don't have to they glorify themselves. And second of all, we've seen that many founders of the private from the broadcasters are from the opposition, and they can also are interested in showing the harms, but they do not have that coverage the national channels have. And second of all, we are saying that there's a huge loss of funds, because those channels, the public funded channels, don't care about quality. They are funded by the state. Therefore, competition isn't a problem for them, because whatever their own reach and people seeing them will be, they'll still get their salary. They'll still get whatever they want, whatever they need to. So we see this being a problem, because there's no quality and there's no incentive to raise quality from their part. And second of all, we see that private media has to face an unfair competition. An unfair competition because the private has to struggle with the advertisement, which isn't present in the state media, because it's financed throughout the state means, financial means owned by the state, so it doesn't need it, and to have to wrap the information perfectly. So at the end of the day, it makes the private media have delivered the information it transmits, because it has to focus also on its financial winning, not only on its sense of sending the information.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So this house this side of the house, so the government is trying to tell us two things. First, that the state, the public broadcasters are manipulated by the state, and second of all, they don't have quality because they don't have the competition from the others. We're going to show you in the House of the Opposition that those are the two things that the state broadcaster does have. It's the quality and actually not the manipulation from the competition, from the advertisers, from the people who fund it, which is the state. So there's two main points of the rebuttal that we want to do before we move forward with our constructive case. First of all, we're saying that actually the state and the government are two really different stuff. And the Prime Minister failed to explain this to us. He just assumed that actually what the government wants to pass as laws or as that is going to be broadcasted in those channels or radios or whatever. But it's not that the case. Actually, the state owns those channels. And if the problem is who is in head of those channels, who the government says it's going to be the head or the director or anything, that is the problem. So you change the person who is there. You make it more objective, or you choose a better person that's not using his power to be there. So the problem is that, actually the truth is that the state, as in general, so if you're saying, for example, hospitals that are state hospitals, they're not biased hospitals. That's really different when you're using the word government or state. So what we are saying is that the measure that the proposition is trying to pass is not actually solving the problem of manipulation, which is here the case. He also said about Berlusconi that he had all these channels and stuff, but the truth is that he owned them as private channels. He was the owner, and that's how exactly he used them in order to get to the top of the government, and to get elected again and again and again. So we don't see this happening as having one or more channels owned by the state. Moreover, he was talking about the free media and how everybody in the private channels is being represented, but that's not really the case, because as you can see, an example in Italy or in Greece or in other countries, the private channels are owned by really big corporations or by funds or whoever. And those usually are in the far left, for example, or they don't represent the main good that the state or the public media is actually doing. He also referred to that the state channels don't want quality, but this is problematic in two ways. First, because we see that actually channels like BBC have the really good series and really good documentaries and really care about quality, because actually I'm going to explain this more in my constructive case, because that's the right thing to do, and state cares for the right thing to do and the right things to show to people. And secondly, because actually what pays and what really the private channels care about, it's about profit. So what do people care about? It's more intrigue, or they want lower quality, as we see in the private media. So people push to this direction, to the private channels, and we do have the state channels setting some quality up above and that quality that the people press them. And this leads me to my constructive case to show you exactly how this is working. So first of all, about the educational and the cultural stuff that those state media actually broadcasters bring to the people, and how this works. So if you have a channel that it's a private one that needs money to function, so it cares about profit, it cares about the people who are going to give it to money to it in order to survive. So it needs people to watch it. So it doesn't really care if it provides people with to give them basic knowledge. It doesn't care about giving them a good quality of entertainment, or making them more wise, or trying to make them socially caring about other people around them. But this is exactly what the state media is doing, because actually the role of the state is to make people more vivid and more action, to take a lot of action in the society. And we have been seeing that through all the public channels that have special or movies that are for this reason, or shows or documentaries and stuff like that, that actually don't sell in the other medias that are private. So that's why we need those state broadcasters to have them and to be online. So, and the second thing that it's really important, and we need to have those public broadcasters, is because we need an objective news coverage. And how do we get to that? Actually, as we have showed you, it's different than having the government and the state, as I have proven you to my rebuttal. So what happens when you have this state-controlled broadcaster? It cares about everything in the wide spectrum that should be the average person should be interested in. So they have an independent role. They follow the rules that the state has and the parliament has passed. So to give a specific time according to how popular they are or their law-abiding, to us how they should, for example, how long it should take to show a specific political party, or how important is something that happened in the world around you, or for so many other things that you should know. So the state really cares about this thing. So it makes all those news that appear in your television moving into a wider spectrum, and that's why you should have it, and that's why it makes more objective all the news coverage that we do have in our televisions. For all these reasons, we make the vote.
Okay, the speaker for the speech, and now I'd like to invite the Deputy Prime Minister to continue the case for state government. Your pleasure.
Thank you. I would first of all like to clarify that our stance, what we are trying to say, is not that private entities, private televisions are more than a state-owned entity is. What we are saying that it is very probable that a private entity is also subject to manipulation for private directors from the people that control possible. But what we are trying to say here is that it's far more dangerous to have a public-owned television who is very closely tied to the government and to the political leaders of a state, because the manipulation is way more direct that it is made by a private entity. Because a television that is owned by the state is in direct contact and in a direct dialogue with every measure that is adopted by a state, by a government, and can immediately censor and it can immediately manipulate information, having direct access to everything that is happening inside a government, inside the factor that is making decisions. With what I'm going to try to explain, first of all, that our stance is that a state identifies itself with the political will of a government, of a parliament, and that is why a state is. There is no abstract idea of an entity that is called a state that is neutral, that has no interests, and that is not led by somebody who went to an electoral campaign and who fought for it and who is very eager to remain there because it has power. This is how society works. When a state is controlled and it identifies itself with a political party who to do its best to remain in that position for which it fought pretty much. Now, further on, what we identified as a problem is this issue of the conflict of interest, which we believe that was not tackled by opposition. Why do we say that there is a conflict of interest? Because the way a public television works is actually through the decisions and the directions that are headed, that are given by the parliament or by the government, which is a political entity. The state decides the hierarchy. The state decides who is the director, who is going to be in charge, and what decisions are going to. which makes it very, very dangerous. Here we've been told that we see that we've been rebutted with related to the case of Berlusconi, and they told us that Berlusconi is a private financed the televisions as a private entity. But what we see as the essence of this case, of the Berlusconi case, is that he was a political member. He was the prime minister of Italy, and he used his influence as a prime minister, indeed, controlling a private entity, the private media, but the essence of this was that he was in charge of the state and how the state works, and he managed to manipulate information and to direct and to distort everything that was transmitted. Further on, they have told us that another argument that sustains the fact that when you have public-owned television is that usually that you have authorities that control what information is transmitted and how it is transmitted. Private entities can be controlled by an authority who can actually punish or make public if a private television does not represent both sides of the political will. But these institutions are usually public as well, and they go hand in hand with the public television. If you have a public authority that controls the private entities and can assure that information is transmitted equally, and that you have both a common representation of both political wills, that might not happen when there's a public authority that controls a public television, because they have the same interest of the political party that is in charge. Further on, we try to explain why it is very dangerous, because this tendency to manipulate is made more plausible because you have a very big spread of these televisions, because they are very accessible in remote areas, in villages where people are not that highly educated and they do not have access to other information coming from different parts. And when you have, there are so many people who do not afford to buy cable, so they would have so they could be informed by other sources of information as well, and they make them very prone to absorbing only one position and only the message that is transmitted by a public institution, who, as we explained, is going to yes, please.
About villages, you do realize that the reason only the public broadcaster is there is because it's not profitable for the others to be there. So what you're doing is you're saying, okay, you live in a village, you won't have any television now.
That is okay. Sometimes it's maybe better that if they won't have access to public television, that would be an incentive for them to buy cable and to have access to more televisions. It's better sometimes to not to have access to a distorted information than to have access to a distorted information who could lead to who could influence the future of a country. Further on, we talked about the argument that refers to the fact that it is not a fair competition, because these televisions are funded by the state authorities. They may gain money from private entities who give them money to make commercials, and it is not fair towards the other televisions who only have from publicity and from their own sources of money. And this is not fair, because it encourages public television. It does not encourage public television to inform, to have an objective informing of the audience and to quality of the information that was given. Now, moving on to the case of the opposing team, which referred to the fact that culture is broadcasted through public television mainly. What we have to say here is that as long as information is not useful, is not considered necessary by the audience, and maybe it should not be transmitted. We think that free market should work naturally and should decide what information should be transmitted and what information should not. And as long as the society considers that culture is, then maybe it should not be a part of the media. Further on, we see that there are examples like Discovery Channel and other science channels that assure that people have access to culture-related content and to science-related content, and they seem to work really fine, even though they are not state-owned. So we consider that this part of information can be transmitted through private entities, and that has worked up until this point. Thank you.
We thank the speaker for a fine speech, and I would like to invite the deputy leader of the opposition to close the debate on the first half of the first table. Here.
Okay, thank you, Madam Speaker, ladies and gentlemen. Now, before I continue on our constructive case, I'd like to spend a few minutes addressing some of the issues we heard from the side of the proposition. And first of all, just to get this out of the way, this issue with Berlusconi, okay? What we're saying is he owned all the private media before he was the Prime Minister. That's how he managed to become the Prime Minister, okay? And that is exactly the problem. You have media moguls that control everything, pretty much, and they can convince the public of whatever the hell they want. And we don't like that. We think there should be a state-owned broadcaster that has an objective to be objective, okay? That's what we're saying. But moving on to the other things you said, especially that part, we heard in the end of your speech that, you know what, if the free market is not very important or is not valuable, it should go, we don't care. Okay, we think there's a problem with that. We think that the problem with basically allowing everything to work through the free market is exactly that you have very crucial points of our society that will just go away because they don't generate profit. And we think that that's exactly why the state is there. The state is there to say, you know what, we do realize this part of human activity cannot, at this point at least, generate some profit, but we recognize that it's important to people and we will provide it. That's what the state does. It provides for people things that cannot generate profit and therefore the free market doesn't take care of. That's why we need the public broadcaster. Which brings me to the second thing I want to say about the villages, as I told you in the point of information. The reason that villages only have, well, in some countries or whatever, but in any case, the reason why they only have the coverage of the public broadcaster is because only the public broadcaster has gone through with that investment. Because the privately owned broadcaster will say, well, you know what, there's no point for me, it won't generate any profit for me to spend another, I don't know, let's say 10 million euros in order to reach another 10 homes. The privately owned broadcaster will never do that. That's why you have the state that recognizes that, you know, these people, just because they live far away, it doesn't mean they shouldn't have access to the news. They should, and that's what the state does. It provides them with that. With what you're proposing, that will go away as well. Right? And then the general idea, no thank you, the general thing that side is, you know, they have this idea that basically everything owned by the state is the same as being owned by the governing party, right? And therefore it's automatically biased and it can never be good. And there's a few problems with that, ladies and gentlemen. And allow only the privately owned broadcasters, for example, which will be controlled by a public authority. First of all, a public authority to control them. Why, since everything publicly owned is biased, why won't that authority be biased? Okay, you can't safeguard against that. And if also what you're saying was the case, then you'd see basically anyone who works in the public sector be replaced after an election, which clearly doesn't happen. There's such a thing as a continuity of the state, there's such a thing as a separation of powers in the democracy, etc. Now, if you said, okay, we have some powers, they're not perfect, we see some problems with that, maybe we should figure out a way to make them even more independent or even more objective, we'd be fine with that. But the solution can't be they're not perfectly objective, so let's just throw them away. It just can't be. Yeah.
There's no competition for them, whereas there's competition.
Which is a good thing, as I told you, because the free market and competition doesn't work in everything. It only works when there's profit to be made. And sometimes profit isn't there to be made. As in culture that As in culture that, as my partner explained to you. There's no profit to be made by showing, I don't know, by spending 10 minutes of television time for, I don't know, traffic education, for example, right? That's something that the state provides for its people so they don't get killed by car accidents. The privately owned media will never spend that 10 minutes of television time for free. It will never do it, and that's a problem. But moving on to my case, ladies and gentlemen, and talking about this idea of advertisements that's been mentioned a bit. So, how do privately owned broadcasters make money, right? They make money from advertisements. And that's why they want more viewers in order to sell their advertising time more expensively to the advertisers. And there's an inherent problem with that when it comes to the news, ladies and gentlemen. The problem is that this is exactly what guarantees that the news can never be objective in a privately owned channel. What is the incentive of a privately owned channel to report, let's say, some bad news of its major advertisers? They will never do it, ladies and gentlemen, because they will actively lose income by doing so. And a privately owned broadcaster is a for-profit company. It will never do something that will Yeah, go.
The same logic couldn't be applied into public-owned.
No,
by the
because
state,
public-owned.
by the state.
No, because exactly it's owned. It's funded by the state. It's not owned. It's not for profit. That's my point. It's there to do a job, and that isn't to generate money, to generate income. A privately owned channel is there to generate income. It doesn't care about objectivity. It doesn't care about you. It doesn't care about anything. Only for profit. And while that is a perfectly good model for some parts of human activity, we do not think it's a very good model when it comes to the news, ladies and gentlemen. We want the news to be objective. We do not want a system that dictates what is reported in the news based on whether, for example, it is in the best economic interest of the owner of that channel. We need a different model, which is why what they're proposing will never work. Also, we have another problem with advertisements, which is becoming very clear in the last few years, ladies and gentlemen. Native advertising. What is native advertising, ladies and gentlemen? It's basically reporting something as news, which is, and let's say, basically disguising as news. It's like when you have a channel reporting on the coming out of the new iPhone, for example. That is not news, ladies and gentlemen. That should not be news. That is just advertising that Apple, in that case, or other companies have paid for to that channel, and they present it to the viewer as news. And we find a very big problem with that. We like our news to be objective and to be newsworthy, basically, and not just advertisements undercover. So, what have we told you today? Because the role of the media is not just to provide entertainment, something that the channels can do quite well, but it's also to provide education, culture, to get to everyone and to provide the news. And because we think that the best model to do those things is the coexistence of privately owned broadcasters and publicly owned broadcasters, we're proud to oppose.
We thank the speaker for his fine speech, and now I would like to invite the member of the government to continue with the case for her side. Here she is.
Alright, so first and foremost, I want to clarify some things that I think side opposition is kind of missing with our side government points. First, they keep assuming that the government is unbiased, whereas the private sectors are biased, and the assumption around is like, who has the most biased opinion? Who's going to show the most biasness in the news outlets and in the media? What you need to understand is that the government who is in power with the political parties who have the most power, that is where the bias is going to lean towards. That's who it's going to favor. As top half government claimed, they did mention that there is going to be of the media and of the news outlets. It doesn't matter who is in power, it doesn't matter what media coverage you're getting, if it's private or public, what's going to happen is you are going to get some sort of biasness. And side opposition is coming up here and claiming that no, the government is not biased. It's the private sectors who are, it's these private people, private ownership who have the bias claims and who are the ones who are controlling the media. These are the people who are controlling what you are getting, which news you are receiving, and that's not true, that is not right, that is not what the point is. And another issue that we are missing here is the where the people are going to get their information from. Now, side opposition came up here and said that the free market isn't going to work and that it is always going to fail unless there is state intervention involved. This is not true. With state intervention, without state intervention, the free market isn't going to fail. The free market is a balancing, self-correcting entity. It's always going to be there. It's not going to crash and burn just because the state is not funding or providing information in the public broadcasters or funds for these private broadcasters. So if the if the state stops it from being driven by, let me get my thoughts together for a moment. All right, so if it is becoming more publicly owned for the people and less controlled by the states and by the government, then we're going to see less spread of propaganda and fear-mongering that governments can sometimes provide for their people. Now, fear-mongering in this case could be information about how the economy is failing its people, and this creates more panic and stock markets work. And, you know, again, with the self-correcting free market, if you create this fear, not at this time, thank you, with the fear-mongering,
What fear-mongering?
Fear-mongering, again, with the propaganda, you're going to see fear-mongering with wars, information about the issues going on in the Middle East right now, or issues going on just in countries in turmoil at the moment. There's a lot of issues in the world today, and with the state sector, they're going to paint the prettiest picture, or they're either going to paint the worst picture to try and get a rise out of the people. What's going to benefit the best, rather than what's going to benefit the people the most. It's not focused on the people. So what we need to do is we need to bring it back into the publicly owned sector, or even into the private sector where it is owned by the people, where the people know what they want and what they want to watch. So the people believe their governments right now, as it is in the status quo, with their news outlets and their organizations, with their broadcasting companies, and if these continue to exist, people will be less critical of the news that they are receiving, which means that they won't know how to analyze this information. Whereas if the states no longer own these public broadcasting networks, then they're going to be more critically able to analyze these private news sectors, and they're going to be able to get the best out of the information that is presented to them. So on this point, we need to really understand that the private interest groups create more variety to the people. Now again, with the free market spread of information, this void is going to be filled. It is self-regulating. It's not going to crash and burn as side opposition is claiming. So going on to some extensions, the state identifies with the government as side government, and reiterated, it's going to conflict with the interest of the states versus with the people. So if you have the states controlling this news outlet, these news organizations, and the flow of information to the people, there is going to be a lack of information that is reaching the people. With this lack of information, you're going to see more ignorance in the people, in the countries, and in the governments, because if they are uninformed voters, for example, they're going to see what is presented to them. And if the states and the governments own these news organizations, then they're going to be voting for what is right in front of them. And if what is right in front of them is what the government is telling them to vote for, then you're going to see that it's going to be, it's creating more bias in the voting world and in these societies. So with the, no, thank you. With the spread of information, we need to, again, really focus on this and why it is important, because side opposition keeps claiming that the private sector is going to ruin everything. They're going to just destroy, they're going to destroy all of this stuff, and it needs to stay with the state. However, this is simply untrue, because if it is taken into the public sector where it is owned by the people, you are going to create more diversity, and more information is going to reach these people. Diversity is incredibly important. No, thank you. So with the diversity and the spread of information, you're going to get more sides to a story, rather than just what the state is presenting to a person or to a group of people. You're going to see more people who are rising to a challenge of saying, being more critical and being more analytical to what is being presented to them. You're going to see a better educated society with broadcasting companies that is no longer controlled by the states. So if the states no longer control these places,
we keep saying that if you take the government out, then the media will be controlled by the people. It won't. It will be controlled by Rupert Murdoch, whom I can't control. I don't vote for him. I can vote for who is the head of the state.
No, but what you need to also understand is that the broadcasting companies are so much more broader than just what is on the television, because you have internet. You have people who can go out and see that maybe Rupert Murdoch is incredibly biased presenting. So if you have people who go out onto the internet and see, like, hey, this is what I am reading, this is what is presented to me, this is how I am analyzing it, then you're going to get people who are going to be more able to rise into this market. So you are going to see unbiased opinions. You are going to see unbiased news sources coming to a rise. The news has to care about the people. The broadcasters have to care about the people. So with the people, if they are seeing these, the news and this, able to analyze it in the way that they need to, then it's not going to just be about ratings or anything else that side opposition has presented to us. So please, go with side government today.
To extend
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I believe that the media is the fourth power, and the media has a lot of influence within our society. In the first half of the debate, we heard a lot of interesting things, and we had the idea about quality throughout the whole first half of the debate. But what we didn't agree upon is that what is quality actually? Because quality for the private sector is making the most money out of the broadcast that they make, while quality for the public sector is informing the people and making quality shows that improve our country as a whole, and that are genuinely broadcasts who are better for the country as a whole, not for private investors, and they're not about money. So this is the idea of quality. We believe that both the private and the public sector strive towards quality, but they strive toward different kinds of quality, Madam Speaker. Also, in the first half of the debate, we heard the idea about objectivity. And I believe that the minority is the public sector. It is the public media, because as side proposition said, 80% of the media in Italy, a Western liberal democracy that has the idea that it is a democratic state, that it has freedom of speech, is controlled in 80% by a private person called Silvio Berlusconi, who actually is not the government. So proposing that the government should generally the BBC or any other program that is government funded is giving the people an alternative to the status quo, because in the status quo, 80% of the information you get is controlled by one person, and this one person wants power, this one person wants you to have this opinion, and the government's idea, while you have state television, you have the idea of the state. You have the idea of what is best for you. And we'd like to tackle this idea that when you have state television, it is controlled by a certain political party or by a certain government. We believe this is absolutely false. We have to make the distinction between a government and a state. This is state-controlled television, not government-controlled television. We are not saying that the governments who are in power have to control the television. That is why it is state television, because it belongs to everyone. And we believe that it is a great disincentive, and it doesn't happen generally in Western liberal democracies, that a public television broadcasts something that encourages a certain political party, because all the other political parties are going to be against it, and there will be revolts. This generally does not happen in Western liberal democracies. You don't get, no thank you, you don't get these incentives, and you don't get one public television saying this party is better or making political propaganda on behalf of that party. Well, you have many, many private companies and private televisions that reach to the little man that we talked about in the first half of the debate, that reach to the little people and say, this is our party, this is the greatest party ever, and this is what you should vote for. No, thank you. Madam Speaker, we'd like to firstly rebuttal some of the things that the first speaker of the closing government said. The idea of fear-mongering by the governments. Firstly, why would a government fear-monger its people? Why would a government say to its people, be afraid, be terrified, because it will lead to instability within the state. The state does not want to be destabilized. The government wants to remain in power, and that is why it needs a stable state. So fear-mongering is not an option. Fear-mongering is something a government generally would do. And as we clarified, the state-owned television does not mean government-owned television. No, thank you. The idea that people will be more able to analyze the news. Well, this is generally happening at the moment with public television, because in private televisions, people tell you, watch this, this is good, this is correct. You have political parties who have televisions, and they are saying to you, this is the right thing to do. While state televisions, they say, well, this is one party, this is the other party, this is the third party, this is what's happening actually. So generally, the state televisions are the ones who present the truth and present people with an objective opinion. Yes, please.
And how do you explain the fact that there were no corruption discoveries done by public televisions throughout the world?
There are actually a lot of discoveries of political corruption done by the private sector. By the public sector. And these scandals and corruptions are done by the public sector, because the private sector is often owned by the people who are creating that corruption, and the people who control, as you said, 80% of the media at the moment. This is not something we encourage, and this is not something we believe that should define this debate. Madam Speaker, in our substance, we will try to prove to you 4 things. First is that the only media that has no personal interest attached to the debate that we are, no personal interest attached to the people is the public media. Secondly, that the public broadcasters do not adhere to political propaganda. Thirdly, that public television sponsor quality productions and education in regards to television, which is actually the main focus of public television. If you want a second opinion, you can always watch a private television, but you have to have the public television financed in order for it to produce quality programs. And fourthly, we want to say that the most reliable source of information is actually the public sector and not the private. No, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we told you that actually having 80% of the whole media, controlled by one person, creates a monopoly. It manipulates the people, and it tells the people, you have this choice. The middleman, the little man that we talked about, that has no information, that lives in a village and has no broad access to television, has only one opinion, because that is the information that he is absolutely, no thank you, that gets to him. By funding public television, we are giving that television an incentive. We are giving that television an incentive to get to the little man, and we are telling to this television, yes, you go there, you tell those people what is actually happening, and you present the idea not of the government, not of the private business, but of the whole state. The fact that the state that is objective in its opinions, ladies and gentlemen. The public broadcasters do not adhere to political propaganda. No, thank you. They give all political parties a chance, because at the moment, as we believe, 80% of the media, or a huge percentage of the media, is controlled by one person, and we're a corporation, it has certain political interests. It is normal to assume that. But what happens at the moment? If you don't have public television, if you don't have a television that says we are going to show we are going to show all the points of view, then you have only sector, which is, well, we won't show your political party, we won't show your point of view, because we believe that X should become prime minister and not Y. This is we believe is wrong, and this is we believe why the public sector should be financed and should be paid for by the government. No, thank you. Another thing we'd like to state is that the most reliable source of information is, as we said, public television. We don't believe that what is profitable should be the driving force, because the debates we are having here are not profitable, but they are hugely give us a lot, they are engaging us, they give us information, they teach us a lot of things. So generally, quality, as we said, is subjective. And actually, in the biggest amount of cases where there's a cataclysm or a natural catastrophe, it is the public television that tells people what is the most important thing to do and what is the government's stance on a certain topic. Because if there is more disaster, it is the most efficient way to have that disaster tackled by the public sector, by the public television, and the public television to be saying to the people, you have to go there, you can help by volunteering, you can help by donating at this address, and this is public television in the first place. This is why we have it, because it functions in the name of the state, not in the name of a government, not in the name of a political party, not in the name of a private business, in the name of the state. Madam Speaker, we prove to you that actually quality is subjective. We prove to you that public television is needed even today, that it gives us a lot of things, and that we shouldn't give up to the monopoly of the private sector. We believe that the public sector should be financed. Thank you very much. We beg you to oppose.
I thank the speaker for his fine speech. And now I would like to call upon the government whip to conclude the case of site government. Here.
All right, Madam Speaker. Today I'm going to ask two questions that I think really ask the important questions of this round, and that is, public or private, who has more incentive to provide an unbiased and quality news, and what is best for the people ultimately? And here on side government, we believe that state-funded programs are not the best actors for this. We see that when you have a state-funded organization, they are incentivized to provide the interests of the state, because states do have interests. They have interests of power and of taxation. Like, they have this idea that states are apolitical and don't have any interests whatsoever it's just ludicrous. My partner brought up this idea that that states are using this to fearmonger and to promote an agenda with the people, and I believe this is true. When they control, they can make Ebola seem like a way bigger deal than Ebola is, if they feel that their state needs to fear it, or they can make terrorism a big deal when it's not a thing in their area. So they use it to promote their own political agenda and the things that they need brought forward and into the voters' eyes in a way that they need it brought into the voters' eyes, and we believe that this is bad. Private industries, while they are funded by corporations and really rich people, they still have an incentive to be unbiased, because in order to get funded, in order to get any funding, they have to have viewers. And because nobody is going to fund a television site that doesn't have viewers, as my partner brought up, and so people vote with their view in this opinion. And so if a corporation that is funding it is being biased and they don't tell the people that their company is being biased, then the people won't want to watch that. And we believe that people have an assumption that their government is fair. As side opposition is saying, governments want what's best for their people, and we believe this is the assumption that all people have, as my partner said, is why why state-funded broadcasting companies are really a harm to the people. They're a harm to the people because people buy into them. Whereas when I watch Fox News, I know that Fox News is biased, and I take everything that they have to say with a grain of salt. Whereas the average person is more likely to believe that their government is not promoting an agenda. And so when they watch that news, they don't view it with the critical eye that they view the private industry with. And this is why we believe that the private industry has the most incentive to promote a good quality of news, because they need the viewers. They need the viewers to get the money and to make their station run, whereas the public sector has no incentives to be accountable to the people, yes.
Yeah, but you just said before that if you know it's biased, you're not going to watch it. And then you mentioned Fox News, which is watched by millions of Americans. It's the most biased news organization that I know of.
Okay, well, people do watch it, but they watch it with a critical eye. I mean, everybody who watches Fox News pretty much makes Fox News. You watch different news sources. You analyze a variety of different news sources, whereas when there is a public, state-funded organization, you lose the incentive because you just assume that they're going to give you the unbiased and the best information. And this is what my partner really brought up. And this is what we think is bad for the people. So public or private, who has the most incentive to be unbiased? It's the private, because they are more directly accountable to the people because they have to be profitable in order to run. If they're not profitable, they cease to exist, and it's kind of a moot point. Whereas if the public doesn't cater to if the publicly funded, state-funded, doesn't cater to the needs of the people, it can still keep going on because they don't have requirements to gain this funding. And what is best for the people? We believe that the free market is best for the people, and that a news system regulated by the free market is going to be ultimately best for the people, because it is going to create an unbiased sort of news. And not unbiased in the sense that they won't promote political agendas or certain parties, but they will know that they have to be accountable to the people because they seek a profit. And the people will know that they are most likely biased. Like, we watch Fox News and we know that Fox News, they will know that these are biased, and they will watch multiple news sources instead of thinking that they can get their one news from one particular place. You know, if a state-funded entity exists, it's going to be a lot easier for people to just look and say, oh, this information must be right. Whereas if that doesn't exist, people will be forced to critically analyze the news in many different ways. My partner brought up that they will use the internet to look at who is funding these corporations and why they are funding them and what the information being presented is. So we believe that this is the best way to get information to the people. If we put it in the hands of the private industry, the free market will regulate, will choose what the people want to view. And that this is ultimately best for the people, because then the government doesn't have the power to manipulate mass amounts of people. We've seen historically people being, propaganda being put everywhere, and people being manipulated by their own governments. You would disagree?
Yes, madam. Do you agree that most people view politicians as generally corrupt, and generally the opinion of people as the politicians are corrupt? By that making, that public television is not generally the most believable.
Yeah, I don't believe that's the case. I believe that you have this assumption that because they show everybody and they are somehow unbiased, these people, if they look at what is on the state televisions, they're going to believe it. If they say that this bill that is going to stop terrorism is going to stop terrorism, there's no need for them to question that more, because it's come from the state that they trust. It has come from this one source of information, and there is no need to look anywhere else. And we believe that having the private sector control this forces the people to critically analyze their news. And we believe that when people critically analyze their news, we get smarter voters, we get more educated voters, and we get people that care about the news that they're getting and don't just buy into what the state is telling them to buy into. And we believe that this leads to a healthier. We on side government believe that having the private sector control it is because the private is better, because the private sector has more of an incentive to be unbiased, because they are accountable to the people, because they need those people to view their shows to be profitable, and it's best for the people because it will force the people to be critical, and it will force the people to evaluate their news, and this is ultimately best for a healthy society. This is why we believe you should support side government. Thank you.
We thank the speaker for her fine speech, and I would like to invite the
Okay, thank you, Madam Speaker. It was a pleasure for me hearing this debate. So first of all, I'm going to make a quick summary of the upper houses. We heard a lot about differentiation between state and media and the way they both control each other. So our first government believed that the government has a great sense of power over its state television. And we do not agree, we strongly disagree with this because we have a division between the government. Political parties are changing, politicians are changing, but the TV, which is state funded, it is funded by the money of the people. It constantly stays and it is still accountable to the people for its actions. And I would like to address at this point, I think we heard a little bit earlier about the fact that the free market is the best way to control the government. Okay, so what we're proposing here, what the government is proposing here is we stop funding those televisions and we leave it all to the private sector. And if we don't have any government television, we will watch television that is only paid for, because if you want to reach television time, you need to pay. And if you want your TV to be successful, you need someone to fund you. And this happen only by having a lot of viewers, because you get those viewers by, at first place, having the money. And those money are usually given by huge corporations, which we believe are strongly biased and politically orientated and therefore can manipulate the people. And another point that I would like to make regarding this no thank you is if we remove those, if we, for the sake of the argument, believe that the private media is this awesome and it is not, we still have the free market. No thank you. We do not have to think of our people as little children, because if the public television, for some kind of reason, which we strongly believe is not possible, is becoming biased, and the people are realizing that what they're hearing in public TV is not true, we still have the free market and we still have the internet that can control this television, this publicly funded television. So we do not exclude all the other media, no other sources of information. Anyone can get information from wherever they like, but we give them a source of whole information where new ideas, small political parties, and different people can actually reach television time, and things that are important to our community but are not generating profit can still reach the public. So anyone can still view their favorite shows, anyone can still watch the books or on any other television they wish to, but we believe that there should be one state-funded television which we believe is not biased, because it is obliged to show the people what is actually happening in the country at the moment. And we believe that if we do not have any public television, this is going to cause small parties to not even be noticed by people. And if we agree with the government that we do not like politicians generally, we think that they are trying to manipulate us, then with only funding, no thank you, private TVs, we are not even giving a chance to smaller parties and to probably better politicians to come into the stage and tell us that they have some ideas also, because they cannot afford it. They cannot afford to give all the money to appear on private TV. Yes?
From the title of the motion, we see that there are two situations, the one where the state funds and the one where the state owns. Could you please define in the perspective of the opposition, the state as an owner, what does it do?
Thank you. From the beginning, we're speaking about funding of TV, which means that the government provides the money to the television in order for it to do its job. This does not mean that it controls every single action, of course. It is still accountable to the public for whatever it does. No, thank you. We still have the free market to control it. We still have the people that are, once again, I would like to say, not little children and should not rely only on one source of information, but we still claim that this is the most reliable source of information, because it is not striving for profit, because profit profit, no thank you. Because most TVs are just there to make profit and not inform us of the really important issue. No TV is going to give some of her television time, no thank you, for, let's say, European projects, education, traffic education, or anything else that can be, no thank you, really important and is not generating profit. But this does not mean it should be diminished, because there are things of our society that should stay there and should not only generate profit and be as reality shows or anything else that we all like to watch, but this is not the way our society works. And no thank you. The benefits of the free market, we agree that there are huge benefits of the free market and the way it controls itself, but we also agree that the free market is just striving for money. And if we leave it out only to the free market, then we're only leaving huge corporations and rich people that own televisions to tell our citizens what is right and what is wrong. And we believe this should not happen, because the people with money are not always the people with the best ideas. And such TVs that are funded by the government are the ones that should give some television time to ideas worth sharing, to small political parties, to things that are important to our society. And of course, it is still accountable to the society for the information it gives, and the free market is still online. Okay, so what have we told you? We told you that the only media that has no personal interest is the state-funded media, because all other medias are striving just for money and are owned by huge corporations and businessmen. Secondly, public broadcasters do not adhere to political programs, because they are there for every single party that there is in the country. Thirdly, sponsor quality productions and education, because no other television will give some of its TV time for education and for things that really matter. And fourthly, that this is the most reliable source of information, because once again, it is just looking for the interest of the people. Thank you. We beg you to oppose.
We thank the speaker for a fine speech and all of you for the entire debate. I guess I'll take like 5 minutes.